My son stood in my doorway with his hand stretched out, not an apology, but holding an envelope stuffed with $500,000. "It's a gift from Madison's trust fund," he said. "She wants to help you retire comfortably." I looked him in the eyes, confused. "You know I don't want anything from that woman." "Then take it for me," he begged. I refused. That's when it happened. She stepped forward, calm as ever, and said, "If he won't take the money, maybe he needs a reason to." Before I could react, Nathan raised his hand and shoved me backward into my own living room. I stumbled, hit the floor, and reached for my phone. "Ray," Madison smirked. "You always wanted control. Now you've lost it." What she didn't know is that I had the number of General Curtis Maddox on speed dial, and the moment he heard Madison's name, his voice went ice cold. "I need to see you. Now." What he told me changed everything. And by the time he walked into my house wearing full dress uniform, Madison's fake smile cracked. Her knees buckled, and for the first time in years, my son saw who he had married. But let me rewind to the beginning. I've lived in Clarksville, Tennessee for nearly 30 years now. You can see Fort Campbell from my back porch on a clear day. That's where I spent most of my life, 3 decades in the Army, including 6 deployments overseas. I'm not one for medals or recognition, but I earned my rank and respect the hard way. My small house sits on 2 acres at the end of a quiet street. Nothing fancy, just a place I could call my own after years of temporary housing in barracks. The American flag flies every day, and my neighbors know me as the quiet veteran who keeps his lawn pristine and helps out when a storm knocks down trees. Nathan was born while I was stationed in Germany. His mother, Elaine, and I made it work for 15 years before we realized we'd become strangers who shared a roof. The divorce was amicable. We both knew we'd done our best. She moved to Florida, and Nathan stayed with me to finish high school in Clarksville. Those were good years. My son was bright, disciplined, and kind. He joined ROTC in high school, and I thought he might follow in my footsteps. Not that I pushed him, I just wanted him to find purpose, something to believe in bigger than himself. When he got a full scholarship to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, I couldn't have been prouder. That's where he met Madison. I remember the first time he brought her home, Thanksgiving break of his junior year. She was stunning, with calculated charm and the kind of polish that comes from old money. Madison Harrington, from a banking family in Connecticut. She laughed at all my jokes and asked thoughtful questions about my service, but something in her eyes never quite matched her smile. "Your son is extraordinary, Mr. Collins," she told me over pumpkin pie. "He has so much potential." The way she said potential, like he was raw material waiting to be shaped, should have been my first warning. Nathan proposed to her 6 months later. The wedding was lavish, held at her parents' estate outside Nashville. I felt out of place among the politicians and executives who filled the guest list. When I gave my toast, I spoke from the heart about honor and commitment. Madison's father later pulled me aside. "Charming speech, Raymond," he said, swirling his scotch. "Very military." He made it sound like a character flaw. After the honeymoon, changes came slowly at first. Nathan called less frequently. When they visited, Madison dominated conversations, steering them toward connections she was making, properties they were considering. Nathan's eyes would occasionally drift to me, as if seeking permission to speak. Then Madison's father died unexpectedly. Heart attack on his yacht. The inheritance was substantial, including a $500,000 trust fund that came due immediately. "This changes everything," Nathan told me over the phone. "Madison has big plans." Those plans apparently didn't include me. Invitations to Sunday dinners became rarer. When my grandson was born, little Ray, named after me despite Madison's objections, I was allowed to visit only on strict schedules. "Madison needs routine," Nathan would explain. "The baby gets upset with too many visitors." I swallowed my pride and played by their rules. A soldier knows when to retreat and regroup. Last Memorial Day, Nathan broke our tradition of visiting Fort Campbell together to honor the fallen. It was the first time in 20 years. "Madison booked us a weekend at a spa resort," he texted hours before we were supposed to meet. "Sorry, Dad. We'll make it up to you." They never did. Instead, they arrived on my doorstep 3 weeks ago with a moving truck and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Surprise?" Madison sang out. "We're staying with you while our new place gets renovated." Nathan shuffled his feet. "It's just for a few weeks, Dad. The contractors found asbestos in the walls." I looked from my son to the woman who had gradually erased him, piece by piece, replacing him with a well-dressed stranger who echoed her opinions. "This is unexpected," I managed. Madison breezed past me into the house. "We'll take the master bedroom. You don't mind moving to the guest room, do you, Ray? It's just that we need the space for all the baby things." I caught Nathan's eye. He looked away. "Actually, I do mind," I said quietly. "This is my home. If you need a place to stay, you're welcome to the guest room." Madison's smile tightened. "Nathan, explain to your father that we need proper accommodations." I stood my ground. "Where did the inheritance money go, if you don't mind me asking? The $500,000 from your father's estate?" The question hung in the air. Madison's eyes narrowed. "We put it into our lifestyle," she replied coolly. "Upgrading the car, redoing the baby's nursery, buying land for my boutique launch. It's all part of the plan." "The plan that now includes moving into my house?" Nathan stepped between us. "Dad, please, it's just temporary." Against my better judgment, I let them stay. With conditions. They took the guest room. No rearranging furniture, no contractors or visitors without my permission. But Madison couldn't help herself. Each day brought new violations of our agreement. She hired a cleaning service without asking. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets. She told my neighbor that I was struggling to maintain the place, and that they were helping poor Ray adjust to retirement. I found myself retreating to my backyard, the only space that still felt like mine. I'd sit there for hours, staring at Fort Campbell in the distance, wondering how the man who had commanded troops in combat zones couldn't command respect in his own home. Then came the envelope, and the push, and the call that would change everything. The moving truck arrived on a Sunday morning, just as I was finishing my coffee on the porch. The rumble of its engine broke the peaceful quiet of my neighborhood, where the most excitement we usually got was Mrs. Peterson's cat escaping into someone's yard. I watched as the massive vehicle pulled into my driveway, followed by Nathan's black SUV, a recent upgrade from the sensible sedan he'd driven for years. Madison stepped out first, designer sunglasses perched on her nose despite the overcast day. She surveyed my modest home as if assessing its market value. Nathan emerged next, cradling little Ray. My heart softened at the sight of my grandson, now 8 months old and already looking so much like Nathan had at that age. "Dad," Nathan called, his voice too bright, too forced. "Surprise visit." I set my coffee down and approached them slowly. "This looks like more than a visit," I said, nodding toward the moving truck where 2 men were already lowering the ramp. Madison stepped forward, air-kissing my cheek without making contact. "We've had such a disaster at the new house, Ray. The renovation uncovered black mold everywhere, simply uninhabitable. And hotels are out of the question with the baby," Nathan added quickly. "Just for a few weeks, Dad. A month tops." I looked at my son, this stranger wearing familiar features. The military haircut was gone, replaced by a stylish cut that Madison probably selected. His posture, once ramrod straight from years of my influence, had softened. Even his clothes seemed wrong, expensive but somehow diminishing. "You could have called first," I said. Madison laughed, that tinkling sound that never reached her eyes. "And miss the look on your face? Besides, Nathan assured me you'd be delighted to have little Ray around." She expertly manipulated the baby's arm in a little wave, using him as a human shield against my objections. I reached for my grandson, and Madison hesitated before handing him over. The weight of him in my arms, solid, real, innocent, momentarily pushed back the unease growing in my chest. "Hello, soldier," I whispered. Ray gurgled and grabbed at my nose. "The movers need direction," Madison interrupted. "Nathan, show them which boxes go where." My son hurried to comply, leaving me alone with Madison and the baby. "Where are you planning to put all this?" I asked, watching as the first of what appeared to be dozens of boxes emerged from the truck. "Oh, we'll make it work," she said vaguely. "Nathan mentioned your basement is mostly empty." I shifted Ray to my other arm. "My basement is my workshop. My tools can be organized more efficiently," she finished, patting my arm condescendingly. "Don't worry, I've hired a professional organizer. She'll be here Tuesday." The presumption left me speechless. This woman had been in my home for less than 5 minutes and was already rearranging my life. Inside, the invasion continued. Box after box stacked in my living room. Madison directed the placement of a crib in my study, converting it to a nursery without consultation. A high-end coffee machine replaced my reliable Mr. Coffee on the kitchen counter. By evening, My home felt foreign. Family photos had been moved to accommodate Madison's art pieces, abstract canvases that probably cost more than my monthly pension. During dinner, takeout that Madison ordered because my kitchen was too disorganized for cooking, I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. I thought you had substantial savings from your father's estate. Why not rent a place until your renovation is complete? Madison delicately wiped her lips with a napkin. Investments, Ray. We're thinking long-term. That money is working for us in much better ways than temporary housing. Dad? Nathan interjected. Madison's launched a boutique business, high-end clothing for military spouses. It's going to be huge. I raised an eyebrow. Military spouses? It's an underserved market, Madison explained smoothly. These women deserve luxury too. I'm calling it command presence. The appropriation of military terminology for her fashion venture irritated me, but I held my tongue. It wasn't worth the fight. That night, lying in my own bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my son's family in my home, I felt like a stranger in occupied territory. The irony wasn't lost on me. After defending American soil for decades, I was losing ground in my own house. The days that followed established a pattern. Madison would implement changes, Nathan would apologize half-heartedly, and I would retreat further into silence. She replaced my towels with expensive new ones that were more photogenic for when she hosted her social media friends. My refrigerator filled with organic baby food and cold-pressed juices. My TV now had a password I didn't know. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in my backyard. It's smaller than I expected, but the location is perfect. Near the base, good schools. Yes, it would be an excellent investment property once we renovate. Ray won't live forever, and Nathan is the only heir. My hands shook as I stepped back inside. She was already planning my death and their inheritance. The final straw came when I returned from grocery shopping to find 3 women I'd never met sitting in my living room, drinking wine and cooing over furniture catalogs. Ray! Madison exclaimed. These are my friends from the Officers' Wives Club. We're just brainstorming. Some updates for the house. I don't recall agreeing to any updates, I said, setting down my bags. One of the women, a blonde with an expensive-looking watch, smiled sympathetically. Madison told us how you've been struggling since retirement. It's so brave of you to accept help. The humiliation burned through me. I was being portrayed as some decrepit old man, unable to care for himself, when, in reality, I ran 3 miles every morning and volunteered at the VA twice weekly. That night, after her friends left, I confronted Madison while Nathan bathed the baby. I won't be painted as incompetent in my own home, I told her. She sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. Ray, people talk. It's better they think we're helping you than knowing you're helping us. It preserves your dignity. My dignity isn't yours to manage, I replied. Her eyes hardened. Listen carefully. Nathan respects you. That military hero worship runs deep, but he loves me. He'll choose me. Every time. Before I could respond, Nathan returned with the baby. Madison's face transformed instantly into a mask of affection. Everything okay? Nathan asked, looking between us. Perfect, Madison answered. Your father and I were just discussing some home improvements that would benefit little Ray. I said nothing. The battle lines had been drawn. The next morning, they followed me onto the porch as I prepared to leave for my volunteer shift. Madison held out an envelope. We've been talking, she said, and we want to help you, Ray. Inside was a cashier's check for $500,000. Madison's gift to you, Nathan explained, his eyes hopeful. For your retirement. For everything you've done. I stared at the check, understanding instantly. This wasn't a gift. It was a bribe. What's the catch? I asked. Madison's smile didn't waver. We'd like partial ownership of the house, just as security for our investment in your future. This is my home, I said quietly, not an investment property. Dad, be reasonable, Nathan pleaded. This is more money than your pension will pay in 10 years. I handed the envelope back. Not interested. That's when Madison's composure slipped. You're being ridiculous. Nathan, tell him. My son's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. Take the money, Dad. It's a generous offer. From you? Or from her? I challenged. Nathan stepped closer. Does it matter? Just take it. No. Madison put her hand on Nathan's arm. If he won't take the money, maybe he needs a reason to. The look that passed between them chilled me. Before I could react, Nathan's hand was on my chest, shoving me backward. I stumbled, lost my balance, and fell hard onto the living room floor. The shock wasn't from the pain. I'd endured far worse. It was from the betrayal. My own son had put hands on me in anger. Nathan looked horrified at his own action, but Madison pulled him back before he could help me up. "Ray," she said coldly, "you always wanted control. Now you've lost it." I reached for my phone. Not to call the police. I would never bring that kind of shame on my son. Instead, I called the one person who could understand what was at stake. "General Curtis." Maddox answered on the second ring. "Raymond Collins," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need your help, sir. It's about Madison Harrington." The line went silent for a moment. Then, the general's voice, tight with controlled fury. "I need to see you. Now." The look on Madison's face when I mentioned the general's name told me everything I needed to know. There was history there, and it wasn't pretty. General Curtis Maddox had been my commanding officer during my final deployment to Afghanistan. A career military man with a reputation for unwavering integrity, he commanded respect not through intimidation, but through moral clarity. In the 15 years since I'd served under him, we'd maintained a friendship built on mutual respect and occasional fishing trips. I hadn't told him much over the phone, just that I needed his counsel regarding Madison and a situation at my home. His immediate response told me he already knew something I didn't. After the call, Nathan and Madison retreated to the guest room. I could hear their heated whispers through the door. My body ached from the fall, but the physical pain paled compared to the hollow feeling in my chest. My own son had put hands on me, something I never thought possible. I sat on the porch waiting for the general, my mind racing through possible connections between him and Madison. What could she have done to elicit such a strong reaction from Maddox just at the mention of her name? An hour later, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. General Maddox stepped out, wearing his full-dress uniform, stars gleaming on his shoulders. This wasn't a casual visit. He was making a statement. "Raymond," he said, clasping my hand firmly. His eyes assessed me quickly. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious," I assured him. He nodded once, his expression grave. "Where are they?" "Inside, the guest room." I led him into the house, noting how his presence seemed to make even the walls stand at attention. The general set a leather briefcase on my coffee table and took a seat, back straight, eyes focused on the hallway leading to the guest room. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked quietly. I explained everything: Madison and Nathan's sudden arrival, the gradual takeover of my home, the $500,000 offer, and finally, the push that had sent me to the floor. Maddox's jaw tightened. "And your son? Where does he stand in all this?" "I don't know anymore," I admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. "It's like she's reprogrammed him. The Nathan I raised would never—" The general placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Don't blame yourself, Ray. Madison Harrington has a pattern of manipulating servicemen and their families. We've been building a case against her for months." Before I could ask what he meant, the guest room door opened. Nathan emerged first, his posture defensive. Madison followed, her face composed, but eyes wary. "General Maddox," she said, extending her hand as if this were a cocktail party. "What an unexpected pleasure." The general stood but didn't take her hand. "Ms. Harrington, I wish I could say the same." Nathan looked between them, confusion evident. "You two know each other?" "Not personally," the general replied, his tone measured. "But Ms. Harrington's name has crossed my desk several times recently. Professional matters." Madison's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. My boutique caters to military spouses. Perhaps that's the connection." "Command presence, isn't it?" the general asked. "Interesting choice of name for someone with no military background." I watched Madison closely. The confident facade cracked momentarily, revealing a flash of panic before she regained control. "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch opposite Maddox and me. "The general has something to share with us." Nathan hesitated, then sat. Madison remained standing until Nathan pulled her down beside him. General Maddox opened his briefcase and removed a laptop. "Raymond called me because he values my judgment. After what I'm about to show you, I hope you'll value it too." He turned the laptop to face us and pressed play on a video file. The footage showed a charity gala, crystal chandeliers, evening gowns, service members in dress uniforms. This was recorded 6 months ago at the Military Family Support Foundation dinner in Nashville, Maddox explained. The camera zoomed in on Madison, stunning in a blue gown, approaching a young officer near the bar. The audio was faint but clear enough. "Captain Reynolds, a moment of your time. I have something you might want to see." She showed him something on her phone that made his face drain of color. "Where did you get those?" the captain asked, voice strained. Madison's response was cool and calculated. "That doesn't matter. What matters is what happens if your wife sees them, or your commanding officer." "What do you want?" Reynolds asked. "Your signature on the Riverside property approval, the one adjacent to Fort Campbell. My company needs military clearance, and you're on the committee." "That's blackmail," he whispered. Madison's laugh was light. "It's business, Captain. You get to keep your marriage, I get my property approval, everyone wins." The general paused the video. Nathan sat frozen, his face ashen. "Madison," he managed, turning to his wife. "What is this?" She rose smoothly, composure intact but eyes cold. "Edited footage, a misunderstanding. That officer owed me a favor. I was merely collecting." "With blackmail?" I asked. "It wasn't blackmail," she snapped. "It was leverage. Something your military mind should understand, Raymond." General Maddox continued, unmoved by her explanation. "We didn't pursue charges then because Captain Reynolds refused to testify. He was too ashamed. But we've been watching Ms. Harrington since. Her boutique, Command Presence, isn't just selling overpriced clothing to military spouses." He pulled out a folder and laid several documents on the table. "It's a front for acquiring properties near military installations through manipulation and, in some cases, fraud." Nathan picked up one of the papers, a business plan showing projected earnings from military-adjacent real estate conversions. "Madison, what is this?" he asked, voice hollow. "A business strategy," she replied tersely. "Every entrepreneur has one. One that involves using your position as a military spouse to gain access to restricted information," the general challenged. "One that includes blackmailing junior officers for property approvals." Nathan turned to Madison, his face a map of dawning horror. "Is this what the $500,000 was for? Were you using my father to legitimize your presence near the base?" Madison's composure finally broke. "Your father is living on this valuable property, wasting it. Do you know what this location is worth with its proximity to Fort Campbell? Millions, Nathan. Millions we could have if he wasn't so stubborn." The silence that followed her outburst was deafening. In that moment, masks fell away, revealing the truth we'd all been circling. Madison had never seen a family. She'd seen assets to acquire. "I think," the general said quietly, "that explains why you married a veteran's son and named your child after his grandfather, establishing credentials within the military community." Nathan stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "You used me? Used our son?" Madison's eyes darted between us, calculating her odds. "Don't be dramatic. I loved you. I still do. This was just business running alongside our marriage." "Business?" Nathan's voice broke. "You named our boutique Command Presence while you blackmailed officers? You pushed my father, a decorated veteran, in his own home over money?" I'd never seen my son look so lost, so shattered. The anger that had flashed through him earlier had evaporated, replaced by a devastating realization. This woman he'd chosen, the mother of his child, had been playing a long con, and he'd been both pawn and prize. General Maddox stood, his presence commanding the room. "Ms. Harrington, I didn't pursue charges 6 months ago out of respect for the officer involved. But assault against a veteran in his own home? Attempted property fraud? That crosses a line I cannot ignore?" Madison's face hardened. "You have nothing concrete. A grainy video, some business plans, circumstantial at best. And who would believe an old man fell down on his own? It would be his word against ours." "Against yours," Nathan corrected quietly. "Not ours. Never again." For the first time since I'd known her, Madison looked genuinely surprised. She'd miscalculated. The hold she had on my son, whatever spell she'd cast, was breaking before our eyes. The living room fell silent after Nathan's declaration. Madison's eyes darted between the three of us, her mind visibly recalculating, seeking a new angle of attack. I'd seen that look before, in cornered adversaries who still believed they could fight their way out. "Nathan," she said, her voice softening to the tender tone she reserved for manipulating my son. "You're upset. I understand. But think about our future. About little Ray. Everything I've done has been for us." Nathan shook his head slowly. "No, it was for you. It's always been for you." He turned to General Maddox. Sir, I want to know everything. How long has she been doing this? How many others has she manipulated? The general gestured for us all to sit. Madison remained standing, arms crossed, defensively. Our investigation began 8 months ago, Maddox explained, when unusual patterns emerged in property acquisitions near 3 different military installations. Properties purchased by shell companies that all traced back to Harrington Holdings. My father's company, Madison interjected. Not mine. A company you inherited controlling interest in upon his death, the general countered. The same company that funds Command Presence, which has been collecting personal data from military spouses under the guise of style profiles. He pulled another document from his briefcase, a spreadsheet with hundreds of names. This isn't a customer list, it's intelligence gathering. Spouses' names, ranks, addresses, financial information, personal details that could be leveraged. Nathan looked physically ill. The launch parties, the exclusive military spouse events you hosted. That was all for this? Madison's composure finally cracked. You're making it sound sinister. It's just business intelligence. It's predatory, I said quietly, using military families' trust to exploit them. Oh, please, Madison snapped, her refined veneer completely gone now. Don't pretend the military is some sacred institution. It's a system like any other, with weaknesses, pressure points, and opportunities. General Maddox's expression remained impassive, but I could see the controlled fury in his eyes. Ms. Harrington, exploiting the families of those who serve this country is not just business. It's unconscionable. And illegal, he added, when it involves coercion, fraud, and assault. Madison laughed bitterly. Assault? Raymond tripped. It was an accident. Right, Nathan? All eyes turned to my son. In that moment, I saw the weight of decision in his face, the terrible choice between loyalty to his wife and mother of his child, or the truth. I wouldn't have blamed him if he'd sided with her. Family is complicated. Lines blur. But Nathan straightened. His shoulders, a gesture so familiar it brought a lump to my throat. It was the same way he'd stood when he was 12 and admitted to breaking Mrs. Peterson's window with a baseball. No, he said firmly. It wasn't an accident. You encouraged me to intimidate him, and I did it. He turned to me, eyes glistening. Dad, I'm sorry. I don't know who I've become. Madison's face contorted with rage. After everything I've done for you? You were nothing when I met you. A scholarship student with a military obsession and daddy issues. I made you relevant. I gave you connections. You isolated me, Nathan responded, his voice gaining strength. From my father, from my friends. Every time I questioned you, you made me feel like I was betraying our family. He looked down at his hands. I let you remake me because I thought it was love. But love doesn't demand you hurt your father. Love doesn't use your child as a prop. General Maddox cleared his throat. Raymond, I need to know your wishes here. We have enough to open a formal investigation into Ms. Harrington's business practices. The assault is a separate matter. Madison's eyes widened. Investigation? You can't be serious. Do you know who my family is? The connections we have? I know exactly who your family is, the general replied evenly. Your father's connections died with him, and the current administration has a particular interest in protecting military communities from predatory practices. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 53 years. I need a moment. Excuse me. I walked out to my backyard, where the evening air carried the distant sounds of Fort Campbell, a helicopter taking off, the faint cadence of troops running. This had been my sanctuary throughout the ordeal of Madison's invasion. Nathan followed me outside, keeping a respectful distance. Dad? His voice sounded younger somehow, uncertain. I'm thinking, I said. He nodded, waiting. We stood in silence for a long minute. Why? Did you push me? I finally asked. It was the question that had haunted me since it happened. Nathan's face crumpled. I don't know. I was caught between you and her, and you weren't bending, and she kept pushing, and I just broke. It was like watching myself from outside my body. He wiped roughly at his eyes. It's no excuse. None. I've been weak, letting her isolate me, letting her change me. Bit by bit until I couldn't recognize myself anymore. I studied my son's face, the face I'd watched grow from an infant's to a man's. I saw shame there, and fear, but also a glimmer of the integrity I'd tried to instill in him. She's little Ray's mother, I said softly. Nathan nodded, understanding my concern. I know. Whatever happens, that's a complication we'll have to navigate. Inside, I could see General Maddox still seated, Madison pacing like a caged animal. Decisions waited for us there, difficult ones with far-reaching consequences. "What would you tell one of your soldiers in this situation?" Nathan asked. It was a good question, one that cut through emotion to the core principles that had guided my life. "I'd tell them that integrity means doing what's right, even when it's hard," I answered. "Especially when it's hard." Nathan nodded slowly. "And what's right here, Dad? Pressing charges against the mother of your grandson? Destroying your son's marriage? How does that serve anyone?" His questions weren't defensive. They were genuine, probing at the complex ethical terrain we found ourselves in. I thought of little Ray, innocent in all this. I thought of Nathan, already beginning the painful process of seeing his marriage clearly. I thought of the other military families Madison had targeted or planned to target. "Justice isn't about destruction," I said finally. "It's about restoration, setting things right." We walked back inside together. Madison had composed herself again, though her eyes held a wariness that hadn't been there before. "I've made my decision," I announced. "General, I want to file a formal complaint regarding Ms. Harrington's business practices and her attempt to coerce me into signing over partial ownership of my home." Madison's lips thinned to a tight line. "As for the assault," I continued, "I won't be pressing charges against my son." Nathan released a shaky breath beside me. "But," I added, looking directly at Madison, "I want her out of my house. Tonight." "And my son?" I asked Nathan. "Ray stays with me," Nathan said firmly. "He's my responsibility." Madison's calculated composure finally shattered completely. "You can't do this. You have nothing without me, Nathan. Nothing. Who do you think pays for everything? Who do you think makes the connections that keep your career afloat? You'll come crawling back." "Within a week," Nathan stood his ground. "Maybe I will have nothing, but I'll have myself back, and my son will have his grandfather in his life." General Maddox gathered his documents. "Ms. Harrington, I suggest you pack your things. My office will be in touch regarding the investigation." As Madison stormed off to the guest room, slamming the door behind her, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what might have been, and a cautious hope for what might still be salvaged from the wreckage of manipulation and betrayal. The night Madison left was one of the longest of my life. While Nathan helped her pack, their tense voices occasionally rising from the guest room, I sat in the kitchen with General Maddox planning next steps. "The investigation will take time," he explained, his voice low and measured. "Federal cases involving financial fraud aren't quick, especially when the suspect has resources." "Will she face jail time?" I asked, not sure how I felt about that possibility. Despite everything, she was still my grandson's mother. The general's expression was grim. "Potentially. The blackmail evidence alone is substantial. Add wire fraud, attempted property extortion, and misrepresentation of military affiliations for financial gain. It's serious, Ray." I nodded slowly, processing what this would mean for little Ray, for Nathan. The consequences were rippling outward, touching lives beyond our immediate circle. "What about the others she targeted?" I asked. "The military families?" "We'll be reaching out to everyone on that spreadsheet," Maddox assured me. "Most were probably just unwitting sources of information, but some may have been directly exploited. Each case strengthens the prosecution." Our conversation paused as Madison emerged from the hallway, pulling a designer suitcase. Her face was a mask of cold fury. Nathan followed, carrying their sleeping son wrapped in a blue blanket. "I've called a car service," Madison announced, not looking at either of us. "I'll be staying at the Riverside Hotel tonight. I expect the rest of my belongings to remain untouched until I can arrange proper transportation." Her tone was imperious, as if she were still in control of the situation. But the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her uncertainty. "Of course," I replied evenly. "Your things will be safe here." Madison turned to Nathan, who was gently rocking little Ray. "You're making a catastrophic mistake," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Think about our son." "I am thinking about our son," Nathan responded. "That's why I'm staying here tonight. He needs stability right now." Madison's jaw tightened. "This isn't over, Nathan. Not by a long shot." With that final threat hanging in the air, she walked out the front door without a backward glance. Through the window, I watched as she climbed into a black town car and disappeared into the night. The silence she left behind was deafening. General Maddox stood and clasped my shoulder. You did the right thing, Ray. It took courage. I wasn't so sure. The victory, if it could be called that, felt hollow. A family had fractured in my living room tonight. My grandson's future had just become infinitely more complicated. After the general left, promising to call the next day, Nathan and I sat in awkward silence. Little Ray slept peacefully in his father's arms, oblivious to the seismic shifts occurring in his world. You can put him in the crib in my study, I offered. It's already set up. Nathan nodded gratefully. Dad, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. We don't need to figure everything out tonight, I told him. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. But sleep eluded me. I lay awake, replaying the evening's events, wondering how things had unraveled so completely. At some point, I heard Nathan in the kitchen, the quiet clink of a glass being filled with water. I thought about joining him, but decided against it. Some journeys need to be walked alone, at least for a while. Morning brought a strange new reality. I woke to the sound of my grandson's babbling and the smell of coffee. In the kitchen, I found Nathan awkwardly attempting to feed little Ray while scrolling through his phone. She's been busy, he said by way of greeting, turning the screen toward me. Madison had posted on social media, painting herself as the victim of a controlling father-in-law and a military establishment closing ranks against an outsider. The comments section was filled with supportive messages from people who knew only her curated version of events. It's what she does, Nathan said, his voice flat. Controls the narrative. I poured myself coffee and sat across from them. Are you surprised? No. He sighed, setting the phone down. But I am worried. She's smart, Dad, and vindictive. This won't be a clean break. He was right, of course. By afternoon, Madison's attorney had called, outlining terms for Nathan's temporary separation from the marital home and establishing a visitation schedule for little Ray that heavily favored Madison. She's trying to limit your access to your son, my own hastily. Retained lawyer explained during an emergency consultation. It's a power play, but also strategic. If she can establish herself as the primary caregiver early in the separation, it strengthens her position in any future custody arrangements. Nathan's face drained of color. She can't do that. I'm his father. The lawyer's expression was sympathetic but practical. Tennessee courts prefer joint custody when possible, but they prioritize the child's best interests and established caregiving patterns. Ms. Harrington will likely argue that she's been the primary caregiver while you worked. Because she insisted on it, Nathan countered. She hired nannies, then dismissed them, claiming no one could care for Ray properly but her. It was another form of control. The following weeks brought a crash course in family law, restraining orders. Madison filed one against me, claiming I was interfering in her marriage, and the brutal reality of watching my son's heart break as he adjusted to seeing his child only 3 days a week. But something unexpected happened amid the legal battles and emotional turmoil. Nathan began to rediscover himself. It started with small things. He dusted off his old running shoes and joined me for morning jogs. He called college friends he hadn't spoken to in years. He retrieved boxes of his pre-Madison life from my attic, books, photographs, mementos from his time in ROTC. One evening, about 3 weeks after Madison's departure, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Little Ray was with Madison, and the house felt emptier without his cheerful, presence. I keep thinking about how it happened, Nathan said suddenly. How I lost myself so completely. I waited, giving him space to continue. It wasn't all at once, he went on, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. It was gradual. A comment about how my friends were holding me back. Suggestions that my career would advance faster if I dressed differently, socialized with the right people. She'd praise me when I adopted her preferences, withdraw when I didn't. He turned to me, his expression troubled. The worst part is, I thought it was love. That changing for her meant she saw potential in me no one else did. Love doesn't require erasure, I said quietly. Nathan nodded. I know that now. But God, Dad, I was so blind. And then little Ray came, and I was even more determined to make it work, to be the perfect family. The perfect family. Those words hung between us, heavy with the weight of expectations and reality. There's no such thing, I finally replied. There are just people trying their best, making mistakes, forgiving each other, and trying again. Nathan smiled faintly. Is that what you and Mom did? Try your best? We did, I confirmed. And when our best wasn't enough to stay together, we found a way to respect each other anyway. That's why she never turned you against me. And I never spoke ill of her to you. Madison won't do that, Nathan said, his smile fading. She'll try to turn Ray against both of us if it serves her purpose. I couldn't argue with his assessment. Madison had already shown the depths of her manipulation and self-interest. Then we'll just have to love him enough to counterbalance it, I said. Be so consistently present and honest that he learns to recognize truth from lies. As darkness fell around us, we lapsed into contemplative silence. The challenges ahead were daunting. Legal battles, co-parenting with someone who viewed relationships as transactions, rebuilding a life from the ground up. But, sitting there with my son, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Madison entered our lives. Hope. Genuine, unvarnished hope that despite everything, we might find our way through this stronger than before. The next morning brought an unexpected development. General Maddox called, his tone urgent. Raymond, we've uncovered something significant. The investigation into Madison's activities has expanded. There's evidence she was targeting senior officials for blackmail, not just junior officers. My stomach tightened. How high up? High enough that the FBI is now involved. He replied grimly. I need to see you and Nathan as soon as possible. There may be fallout you should prepare for. General Maddox arrived at my house later that afternoon, accompanied by a woman in a crisp Navy suit who introduced herself as Special Agent Diana Howard from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Nathan had come straight from work, still wearing his office attire, a reminder of the normal life he was trying to maintain amid the chaos. We gathered in my living room, the same space where our confrontation with Madison had occurred. It felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if her departure had lifted an invisible weight from the house. I'll get right to the point, Agent Howard began, opening a sleek laptop. Our investigation into Madison Harrington's activities has uncovered a pattern that extends well beyond what we initially suspected. She turned the screen toward us, displaying a complex flowchart of financial transactions, company names, and photographs. Harrington Holdings, the company Madison inherited from her father, has been systematically targeting military installations and personnel for the past 3 years, not just for real estate acquisition, but for something potentially more damaging: information. Nathan leaned forward, brow furrowed. What kind of information? Deployment schedules, security protocols, personnel data. Agent. Howard's expression was grave. Initially through social engineering, befriending military spouses, hosting events where alcohol flowed freely and conversations were recorded. Later, through more direct methods. General Maddox interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. She was building dossiers on high-ranking officers looking for vulnerabilities, gambling debts, affairs, financial troubles, anything that could be leveraged. I glanced at Nathan, watching the color drain from his face as he absorbed the implications. Are you saying my wife is, what, a spy? He asked incredulously. Not in the traditional sense, Agent Howard clarified. There's no evidence she was working for a foreign government. This appears to be purely for financial gain. Military contracts, land. Deals, insider information that could be sold to private security firms or defense contractors. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling to reconcile this new information with the woman he'd married. I never saw any of this. Never suspected. You weren't meant to, I said gently. You were her credential, Nathan. Your background, your connections to the military community through me, they gave her access and credibility. The revelation hung heavy in the air. Nathan had been a tool, carefully selected, methodically manipulated, deliberately deployed. There's more, General Maddox said, his expression somber. Madison's father's death may not have been the heart attack everyone assumed. Agent Howard nodded. We're reopening the investigation. Financial records indicate he may have discovered his daughter's activities and threatened to cut her off. 3 days later, he was dead. The timing is suspicious, to say the least. The implication sent a chill through the room. The Madison we knew was calculating and manipulative, but capable of patricide? It seemed unthinkable. And yet, what happens now? I asked, breaking the stunned silence. We're preparing to bring Ms. Harrington in for questioning, Agent Howard explained. Given the expanding scope of the investigation, we've expedited our timeline. She'll be contacted tomorrow morning. Nathan stood abruptly. I need to get Ray. If she's being investigated for these kinds of crimes, including possibly being involved in her father's death, he shouldn't be with her. Agent Howard raised a cautioning hand. Mr. Collins, I understand your concern, but rushing in might alert her. If Miss Harrington suspects she's about to be arrested, she could flee with your son. She has my child! Nathan's voice rose, panic edging in. My 10-month-old son is with someone you're suggesting might be not just a fraudster, but potentially involved in her own father's death. General Maddox stood, placing a steadying hand on Nathan's shoulder. We'll handle this properly, son. Agent Howard, what are our options for ensuring the child's safety? The agent considered for a moment. We can coordinate with local authorities to perform a welfare check during the arrest. Your custody agreement gives you visitation rights starting tomorrow evening, correct? Nathan nodded stiffly. Then we'll time the questioning too. Conclude before your scheduled pickup. If she's detained, you'll be notified immediately to collect your son. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best we could hope for under the circumstances. Nathan sank back into his chair, hands shaking slightly. I never should have left him with her, he murmured. Not after everything we've learned. I moved to sit beside him. You had no way of knowing the extent of this, Nathan. You've been following the legal process, doing everything by the book. Your father's right, Agent Howard added. And for what it's worth, our surveillance hasn't indicated any risk to the child. Ms. Harrington appears to be maintaining normal routines, likely to avoid arousing suspicion. After the agents left, with promises to keep us informed, Nathan remained on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The weight of the day's revelations seemed to have physically compressed him. I keep thinking I've hit the bottom of this nightmare, he said finally, that there couldn't possibly be more. And then, I know, I replied. There was nothing else to say. No words of wisdom or comfort that could adequately address the magnitude of Madison's deception. That night, neither of us slept much. Nathan paced the hallway, checking his phone obsessively for updates. I sat on the porch, watching the distant lights of Fort Campbell and thinking about the ripple effects of betrayal, how one person's actions could create concentric circles of pain that expanded outward, touching countless lives. Morning arrived with an unexpected development. Nathan's phone rang just after 6. He answered it on speaker, his voice tense. Mr. Collins? It was Agent Howard. There's been a complication. Madison Harrington has fled. Nathan's knuckles whitened around the phone. And Ray? Where's my son? He's safe, she assured quickly. Ms. Harrington left him with a neighbor last night, claiming she had a business emergency. The neighbor became concerned when she didn't return by morning and contacted the local police, who then notified us. The relief that flooded Nathan's face was palpable. Where is he now? Still with the neighbor. We've verified she's not connected to any of Ms. Harrington's activities. Local police are standing by until you can arrive. Nathan was already grabbing his keys. I'm leaving now. We'll have an agent. Escort you, Agent Howard replied. And Mr. Collins, we believe Ms. Harrington accessed emergency funds before fleeing. She may have been planning this contingency for some time. After Nathan left, accompanied by an FBI agent who arrived minutes later, I sat alone in my kitchen, trying to process the latest turn of events. Madison had run, abandoning her own child in the process. It was the final, damning piece of evidence about who she truly was. By noon, Nathan had returned with little Ray, who seemed mercifully oblivious to the turmoil surrounding him. He babbled happily in his father's arms, reaching for me with chubby hands when they entered. "Papa!" he exclaimed, one of his few recognizable words. I took him, inhaling his baby scent, overwhelmed by a surge of protectiveness. "Hello, little soldier," I whispered. As I held my grandson, Nathan filled me in on what he'd learned. The neighbor, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Teller, said Madison had appeared at her door around 9 p.m., impeccably dressed in business attire, claiming an emergency meeting in Nashville. Mrs. Teller said she seemed perfectly calm, Nathan recounted. Said she'd be back by morning. Left a diaper bag. With enough supplies for the night. It was all very normal, planned. Did she leave any message for you? I asked. Nathan's expression darkened. Just a text saying she had to handle something and would be in touch. I thought she meant this morning. The betrayal of abandoning her child seemed somehow worse than all the financial crimes and manipulation. What kind of mother left her baby behind while fleeing justice? But as the day progressed, with FBI agents coming and going, taking statements and providing updates on the manhunt for Madison, I began to see a different perspective. Perhaps, in her own twisted way, she'd made one decent choice in the end, leaving Ray with a safe neighbor rather than taking him on the run. It was a small mercy in a sea of selfish actions, but it suggested that somewhere beneath the calculated exterior, some fragment of maternal instinct had surfaced in her final moments in Tennessee. 3 weeks passed with no sign of Madison. The FBI established a dedicated task force, tracking financial transactions and following leads across multiple states. Her face appeared on news broadcasts and social media alerts. The woman who had once meticulously crafted her public image was now notorious for all the wrong reasons. During this time, Nathan secured emergency full custody of little Ray. The family court judge, presented with evidence of Madison's flight and the ongoing federal investigation, had little hesitation in granting the order. "This is temporary," Nathan's lawyer cautioned, "until she's found and can appear in court." But as days turned into weeks, the temporary arrangement began to feel increasingly permanent. Nathan and little Ray settled into a routine in my home. The guest room transformed into a proper nursery, filled with toys and books. The sound of my grandson's laughter became the heartbeat of the house. Nathan, too, was changing, growing back into himself while simultaneously evolving into something new. He returned to his old habits: morning runs, reading history books in the evening, calling friends from college. But now these activities orbited around his role as a father. He'd run with Ray in a jogging stroller, read children's books aloud with the same serious attention he once gave to military histories, schedule play dates rather than business meetings. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Ray toddle across the lawn, Nathan broached a subject we'd both been avoiding. "Do you think she ever loved him?" he asked quietly. "Or me?" I considered the question carefully. "I think Madison's understanding of love is fundamentally different from ours," I finally replied. "For her, love might be about possession, about what someone can provide or represent." Nathan nodded. Slowly. "I've been trying to figure out when it started. The manipulation. Was it from the very beginning? Was any of it real? Does it matter?" I asked gently. He was silent for a long moment, watching his son examine a dandelion with intense concentration. "I guess not," he finally said. "What matters is now, making sure Ray grows up understanding what real love looks like." "The manhunt for," Madison continued. "Her trail led authorities to Chicago, then Montreal, where the trail went cold. Financial forensics revealed offshore accounts, false identities, contingency plans that had been years in the making. She was always planning an exit strategy," Agent Howard explained during one of her regular updates. "The question is whether it was for this specific scenario or just a general precaution." Nathan's face remained impassive during these briefings, but I could see the toll they took. Each revelation about Madison's calculated deception was another wound to heal, another illusion to dismantle. General Maddox became a frequent visitor, not just for case updates but as a supportive presence. He'd bring toys for Ray and bourbon for Nathan and me. We'd sit on the porch, 3 military men of different generations, watching the sunset beyond Fort Campbell. "The investigation has uncovered 17 military families directly affected by her schemes," Maddox shared one evening, "plus dozens more who unwittingly provided information. We're offering support services to all of them." "I should talk to them," Nathan said suddenly. "The families. They should know I had no idea." The general nodded approvingly. "That would mean a lot coming from you. When you're ready." Ready. That word carried weight. When would any of us be truly ready to face the full aftermath of Madison's devastation? The answer came unexpectedly on a Tuesday morning in late October, nearly 6 weeks after Madison's disappearance. I was in the backyard with Ray, showing him how to plant bulbs for spring flowers, when Nathan burst through the back door, phone in hand, face ashen. "They found her," he said, his voice strained. "In Buenos Aires. She's being extradited." Ray, oblivious to the tension, clapped his dirt-covered hands. "Mama?" he asked, one of the few words in his growing vocabulary. Nathan knelt beside his son, gathering him close despite the muddy hands. "Yeah, buddy. They found Mama." Over Ray's head, our eyes met, a silent understanding passing between us. A new chapter was beginning, one that would require all our strength and wisdom to navigate. The extradition process took another 2 weeks. During that time, Nathan met with a child psychologist to discuss how to handle Ray's eventual reunion with his mother. He attended support groups for families affected by fraud and betrayal. He prepared himself, mentally and emotionally, for what was to come. I watched my son transform through this process, not back into the person he was before Madison, but into someone stronger, wiser, more compassionate. The painful crucible of betrayal had refined rather than destroyed him. Madison arrived on American soil on a gray November morning. The news showed footage of her being escorted from a private jet by federal agents, her designer clothes replaced by a plain tracksuit, her perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a simple ponytail. Even in custody, she maintained her composure, head high, face impassive. Nathan watched the footage in silence, little Ray napping upstairs. "Do you want to see her?" I asked carefully. He shook his head. "Not yet. Her lawyers have already contacted mine. She wants to see Ray." "And?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "The psychologist says a supervised visit might be good for him, to understand she's okay, that she didn't just disappear. But I'm not ready to face her." I understood his reluctance. Seeing Madison would resurface all the pain, all the questions that might never have satisfactory answers. The arraignment was scheduled for the following week. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, blackmail, identity theft, conspiracy to defraud the United States government, and more. The evidence was overwhelming. Madison's lawyers immediately began negotiating a plea deal. "They're offering 15 years with possibility of parole after 10, Agent Howard informed us, in exchange for information about co-conspirators and returning stolen funds. Nathan listened to these details with the detached interest of someone hearing about a stranger. The woman being discussed, this criminal, this manipulator, seemed entirely separate from the Madison he had married, had a child with, had built a life around. But reality couldn't be held at bay forever. The day came when Nathan had to bring Ray for the court-approved supervised visit with his mother. I offered to come along for support, but Nathan shook his head. "This is something I need to do alone," he said, strapping Ray into his car seat. "For all of us." They returned 3 hours later. Ray was asleep in Nathan's arms as he carried him into the house. "How did it go?" I asked softly, helping Nathan settle the sleeping child onto the couch. Nathan sat heavily beside his son, absently stroking his hair. "She cried when she saw him. Real tears, I think. Said she missed him." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "She asked about me, too, if I was okay." "And what did you say?" "I told her I was better than okay, that I was free." Nathan's voice was steady, his eyes clear. "She didn't like that. Started talking about how everything she did was for us, for our future. The same manipulation, just in a different context." I sat beside him, careful not to wake Ray. "Did you believe any of it?" "No." Nathan's response was immediate, certain. "That's the difference. I can see it now. The patterns, the calculated words, the way her eyes never quite match her expressions. It's like looking at a different person." He glanced down at his sleeping son. Ray recognized her, reached for her. That was hard to watch, but the psychologist says that's normal, healthy even. He's too young to understand any of this. "And you?" I asked. "Are you okay?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I think I will be," he said finally. "I agreed to bring Ray for monthly visits while she's awaiting trial. After that, if she's convicted..." He trailed off, the reality of raising a child with an incarcerated mother clearly weighing on him. "We'll figure it out," I assured him. "One day at a time." The plea deal was finalized 2 days later. Madison would serve 12 years, with possibility of parole after 8, in exchange for full cooperation. The details of her schemes emerged in court documents, the breadth and depth of her deception, more extensive than even the FBI had initially realized. She had files on over 30 high-ranking military officials, General Maddox told us grimly, information that could have compromised operations if sold to the wrong people. "Was she planning to sell it?" Nathan asked. The general's expression was grave. "We believe she already had in some cases. The investigation is ongoing." The scope of Madison's betrayal extended far beyond our family, beyond even the military community she had targeted. It reached into national security, into the lives of countless individuals who would never know how close they had come to being collateral damage in her schemes. Yet amid this widening gyre of deception, our small family unit found itself strengthening. Nathan secured a new position with a defense contractor, ironically, the legitimate version of the connections Madison had falsely claimed to provide. Little Ray thrived, his vocabulary expanding daily, his personality emerging as a delightful blend of curiosity and mischief. And I discovered a new purpose in my retirement, being present for both of them as they rebuilt their lives, one careful day at a time. 1 year to the day after Madison's arrest, we gathered in my backyard for a small celebration. Not of her downfall, We never spoke of it that way, but of our family's resilience. Nathan had officially divorced Madison 3 months prior, an anticlimactic legal proceeding that simply formalized what had long been reality. Little Ray, now almost 2 years old, chased Bubbles across the lawn, his laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. Nathan stood at the grill, confidently flipping burgers, occasionally glancing over to make sure his son wasn't venturing too close to the edge of the property. General Maddox had come, along with a few of my old army buddies and some of Nathan's college friends who had re-entered his life. Mrs. Peterson from next door brought her famous potato salad. Even Elaine, my ex-wife, and Nathan's mother had flown in from Florida, our shared concern for our son bridging whatever differences had separated us years ago. "He looks good," Elaine commented, sipping lemonade beside me on the porch. "Healthier than when I saw him last Christmas." "He is," I agreed. "It's been a long road." She nodded thoughtfully. When he called to tell me everything, I couldn't believe it. Not just what she did, but that he had the strength to face it, to rebuild. "He's always had that strength," I said. "He just needed to remember it." The party continued as the afternoon mellowed into evening. Ray eventually tired himself out and fell asleep on a blanket under the oak tree, surrounded by toys. The adults gathered around the patio table, conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. During a lull, General Maddox raised his glass. "To Raymond Collins," he said, his voice carrying the natural authority of command, whose integrity and courage started a chain reaction that ultimately protected our military community and restored his family's honor. The toast caught me off guard. I wasn't accustomed to being the center of attention, especially for something that had felt less like courage and more like desperate self-preservation at the time. "I just did what anyone would do," I demurred. "No," Nathan countered firmly. "You did what a man of principle does. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to give in. You called for help when pride might have kept you silent." His eyes met mine, clear and direct. "You showed me what integrity looks like, Dad." Again, the simple acknowledgement touched something deep within me. Not because I needed recognition, but because it confirmed that the values I had tried to instill in my son had taken root, had survived even the calculated erosion of Madison's influence. Later, as guests began to depart, Nathan and I stood side by side, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "I saw Madison yesterday," he said quietly. "Monthly visit with Ray." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "She asked if I would consider allowing her parents to see Ray occasionally. They've been trying to distance themselves from her actions, claim they had no knowledge of what she was doing." "What did you say?" Nathan sighed. "That I'd think about it. Ray deserves to know his family, all of them. But on our terms, with clear boundaries." His response reflected the thoughtful maturity he'd developed through this ordeal, the ability to separate justified caution from vindictiveness, to prioritize his son's needs above his own feelings. "You're a good father," I told him. "Better than I was." Nathan shook his head. "Different, maybe. The circumstances are different. But everything good in how I parent comes from watching you, Dad." We fell silent, comfortable in the growing dusk. Ray still slept peacefully under the tree, his small chest rising and falling in the rhythm of innocent dreams. "I'm thinking of building my own place," Nathan said after a while. "Nothing fancy. A small house on that piece of land by the creek." He gestured toward the eastern edge of my property, a gentle slope leading down to a small stream. "You want to stay that close?" I asked, surprised. "If you're okay with it," he replied. "Ray loves it here. And he hesitated. "I've come to value family in a way I never fully appreciated before. Real family, not the performance of it." The suggestion filled me with unexpected joy. Not just the prospect of having my son and grandson nearby, but the knowledge that Nathan was making this choice freely, with clear eyes and an open heart. "The land is yours," I said simply. "Consider it Ray's inheritance. Come early." Nathan smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes, something that had become more common as the months passed. "We'll break ground in spring. Nothing fancy, but enough room for us to grow." "Us?" I raised an eyebrow. Slight flush colored his cheeks. "I've been seeing someone, taking it very slowly. She's a teacher at Ray's preschool." This was news. Welcome news. Nathan had been understandably guarded about dating after Madison, wary of his own judgment and protective of Ray's emotional well-being. "Her name is Abby," he continued. She's kind, straightforward. What you see is what you get. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Pretty much the opposite of Madison in every way. I'd like to meet her, I said. You will, when we're both ready. His caution was understandable, even healthy. She knows everything, by the way, about Madison, the arrest, all of it. I wouldn't have it any other way this time. Complete honesty from the start. As darkness settled fully around us, we gathered a still sleeping Ray and moved inside. The house, once briefly invaded and nearly stolen, had transformed over the past year. Photos of Ray adorned the walls. A child's drawings hung on the refrigerator. Toys were neatly organized in colorful bins. It had become a true family home again. Later that night, after Nathan had put Ray to bed in the nursery that was now permanently his, my son joined me. On the porch for a nightcap. The distant lights of Fort Campbell glowed steadily on the horizon, a reminder of the life I'd lived, the values I'd upheld. I've been thinking about what the general said, Nathan mused, swirling the bourbon in his glass. About you starting a chain reaction? I waited, sensing he had more to say. It's true, you know. If you hadn't stood your ground that day, if you'd taken the money, signed over the house, who knows how many more people Madison would have hurt, how many more families would have been exploited. I was just protecting what was mine, I said. Nathan shook his head. No, Dad. You were standing for something bigger. For principle. For honor. He turned to face me fully. When I pushed you, his voice caught slightly at the memory. That was the moment I stopped being me. Stopped being the man you raised. And when you refused to press charges, refused to give in to anger or revenge, that was when I started finding my way back. The night air felt charged with emotion, with the weight of everything we'd survived together. I want Ray to understand what that kind of integrity looks like, Nathan continued. Not just hear about it, but see it lived out. That's why I want to build here, near you, so he grows up witnessing what a man of honor looks like in everyday life. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. You're already showing him that yourself, I managed. Nathan smiled. I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying. We sat in companionable silence, the cicadas providing a gentle soundtrack to our contemplation. Eventually, Nathan stood and stretched. I should get some sleep. Ray will be up at dawn, ready to conquer the world. I nodded, remaining seated. I'll be in soon. After he left, I sat alone in the darkness, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain and betrayal had been real, the damage extensive. Madison's schemes had hurt not just our family, but countless others. The legal proceedings continued, with new revelations still emerging about the scope of her activities. Yet amid the wreckage, something beautiful had emerged. A strengthened bond between father and son, a grandson being raised with clear values, a family rebuilding on a foundation of truth and integrity. I thought about the moment that had started it all. Madison's hand extended with an envelope full of money, her cold calculation that everyone had a price. She had been wrong about me. Wrong about Nathan, ultimately. Wrong about the power of the values we held. In the military, I'd learned that true strength isn't measured in moments of obvious heroism, but in the quiet, consistent choice to do what's right, especially when it's difficult. To stand your ground when pressured, to maintain dignity when attacked, to choose honor over expedience. Those lessons had seen me through combat zones and personal battles alike. Now they were guiding my son through his own war. One fought not with weapons, but with principles, with the steady reclamation of his authentic self. As I finally rose to go inside, I glanced once more toward Fort Campbell, where generations of soldiers had learned the same essential truths. Respect isn't bought with money or position. Honor isn't a commodity to be traded. Integrity, once compromised, must be deliberately, painstakingly rebuilt. Madison had never understood these principles. She had seen my military background as something to exploit rather than respect, my values as weaknesses to manipulate rather than strengths to admire. In the end, her failure to comprehend what truly mattered had been her undoing. Inside, I paused at the nursery door, watching Ray sleep peacefully, untroubled by the complex adult world swirling around him. Nathan had placed my old service photo on the dresser, not as a shrine to military glory, but as a quiet reminder of the legacy of values being passed down. This, I realized, was the true victory. Not Madison's imprisonment or the recovery of stolen assets, but the preservation of something far more valuable. A family's soul, a father's integrity, a child's future built on solid ground. The money she had offered, that $500,000 meant to buy my compliance, seemed laughable now. What price could possibly be placed on this? On the sight of my son sleeping peacefully under my roof, my grandson secure in his father's love, our family bonds strengthened rather than severed by adversity? Some things remain beyond price. Some victories aren't measured in dollars or possessions, but in the quiet knowledge that when tested, you stood firm. When pushed, you held your ground. When threatened, you called not for revenge but for justice. In the end, that was the lesson I hoped little Ray would learn someday. That respect is not given by money or titles or charm. It's earned by how you protect those who can't fight back, by the integrity you maintain when no one is watching, by the honor you uphold even when it costs you. That was the true legacy of my uniform. Not medals or rank or war stories, but the enduring principles that guided a life well lived. Principles that had saved not just my home, but my family's heart and soul.